Hello and welcome to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel and this is week 5 of the Pantry Challenge. I've really enjoyed sharing how I cook from scratch and take care of my family and source food from my pantry, but this week will be my last video in this series. If you'd like to see some more updates on how I cook for my family and more real-time updates, you can follow me at Homemaking with Joy on Instagram, and there I share little snippets of things that I'm preparing for my family. And without further ado, let me show you what I'm cooking this week. It is Monday, January 27th, and we are starting the week with some leftovers. I made a big batch of spaghetti and meatballs, corn on the side. We had it with red sauce originally, but I thought I'd change it up a little bit, and I found this jar of Alfredo sauce in my basement, so I put that on top of it for the family instead of red sauce. Dinner is served. Hey friends, it's Monday evening, and I'm planning to work in my kitchen this evening because it needs help. I have graham crackers over here that will keep me company as I work, but the dishwasher is half unloaded. I have snow clothes there that need to be taken to the basement. I have some stacks of puzzles that my kids are done with, and then I have dishes and all of dinner and everything. So I'm going to tidy this up really quickly, and then I'll take you along for 2 recipes that I'm going to be prepping this evening to make my life better this coming week. We are on day 27 of this challenge, and I've been thinking about a couple things this past week that I wanted to share with you to encourage you. First of all, I've been working quite a while at this to be able to cook from scratch and have a fully stocked pantry and be well prepared for situations like this. So if your pantry or your life or your whatever doesn't look like mine, that's okay. If you want to get better at it, great. Just pick up one more thing here or there, make one small step, and over time you'll be able to do just what I do. And also, skills are valuable. Skills have monetary value. I was thinking this evening as I just whipped up some graham crackers. 5 years ago, if you would have told me that I could do that, I would not have believed you. You know, with this pantry challenge, it does kind of push you to make your own or figure it out, and that is one of the beauties of it, that if I want crackers, I have to make crackers. If I want fill in the blank, I have to make it. And generally speaking, I can. And that's awesome because I have lots of basics stored in my pantry. I have basic cooking and baking skills, and I can read a recipe. I can figure it out, and you can too. So if you want to be able to cook like this, cook from scratch, start small. Don't overwhelm yourself. Little things here and there. You don't have to use freshly milled flour. You don't have to use whatever. Just use what you have, figure it out, and you can do it. There are plenty of recipes online for, let's just go with crackers again, for all-purpose butter crackers. You can make your own Ritz crackers. You can make your own wheat thins. You can make your own graham crackers. And it's really not that hard, but most of us don't have the experience to know that we can or even give it a try. So work on your skills. They are valuable. They are worth money. I saved us a lot of money by making graham crackers at home tonight, not going to the store, not buying them, and not picking up whatever else I would have picked up if I were at the store. And it was a great little snack for our family. So that's what's been on my heart and mind. Your skills are valuable, your time is valuable. Don't give up, keep learning new things, and you can have a kitchen just like mine, or better. Now I'm going to get off my bottom, quit talking, get to the kitchen, and get to work. I am making 2 things, some no-bake granola bars that my husband requested for snacks, and my kids really like them too. So I'm going to make those, and a pear cobbler to have with breakfast. We had some canned pears with our lunch today, and I remembered that I also have frozen pears in the freezer. As I was preserving them, I just couldn't can them quickly enough before they got too soft. So I sliced them and flash froze them, and now I have them just in a bag in my freezer. So I'm going to make a freshly milled pear cobbler to have with breakfast tomorrow. I'll probably put eggs on the side, the pear cobbler, and the kids will think that's a fun treat to have cake with breakfast. And I like cake for breakfast too. So I'll show you how I make those tonight, and let's get to it. I'm going to start with the cobbler first because I can make this pretty quickly and then it'll bake in the oven while I make the granola bars. The first step is to get a stick of butter in an 8x8 and pop that in the oven to start melting. For my dry ingredients, I'm going to start by milling some soft white wheat. This recipe comes from Bajan at Baker Hill Farm. I've used this cobbler recipe with a couple of different fruits and it has turned out well every time. Thankfully, my kids don't seem to have a problem with me running the grain mill while they are sleeping. The kitchen's at the opposite end of the house as the bedrooms, and so between the distance and the kids' sound machines, they have never woken up or said that they have heard the grain mill. While you watch me make this cobbler, I want to circle back around to a question I posed in last week's video, and that is, what instrument do I play? I mentioned that I enjoy listening to orchestral music while I work. Specifically, my favorite at the moment is Dvorak's Symphony Number 9. And so I posed the question, what instrument do you think I play? Many of you guessed, and I'm so glad that you did. And the correct answer is that I play the oboe. I decided to start on the oboe in fourth grade because our music teacher showed us Peter and the Wolf to introduce us to the musical instruments. The duck was my favorite character, and the duck was played by the oboe. I took lessons, I was in the band, and eventually I made it all the way to the college level band and orchestra. I've been part of some really amazing musical groups. I've even helped record a couple of CDs. One of the best full circle moments was when our college orchestra played Peter and the Wolf. To be able to play the oboe part that inspired me to start the instrument in the first place was a really cool moment. So thanks for commenting on my previous video and playing along. A couple of you guessed it correctly. Back to the cobbler, this is what I'm working with. The butter is melted from the oven, so you just pour the batter right on top. You don't even have to mix it together. It's very simple. From there, you grab your fruit. So the original recipe calls for home canned fruit, a pint of it, which is 2 cups. So she says just drain the syrup and then put the fruit right on top of your cobbler. Well, I have frozen fruit, so I'm just grabbing it out of my bag and I'm putting lots on the cobbler because this is going to be served at breakfast. And so I figure more fruit, less cake is probably a better option. My only comment with using frozen fruit, this did turn out a little bit wetter, a little bit denser, and I think it's because of all the extra moisture that was in these frozen pears, but it tasted delicious and we ate it just fine, so don't let that scare you if you prefer to use frozen fruit. Once your fruit is on top, this goes into the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 40 to 45 minutes. It's time to move on to the granola bars. I'm starting with some Rice Krispies. I will link the recipe down below. I have made a couple of adaptations, but I'm pretty much sticking to the recipe. I like that I can keep all the ingredients on hand and you don't have to bake them, but they still hold together. I've made some other bars that are no bake, but they're peanut butter based, and as soon as you hold them in your warm hand, they're all sticky. These actually hold together, they don't melt in your hand, and they function really well, very similar to the perks of a store-bought bar. The next ingredient I'm adding to this dry mix is some quick oats. I imagine you could use rolled oats too if that's what you have. And then I'm going to add some ground flaxseed. Again, you have some options here. You could add more oats if that's what you have on hand, or you could mix it up with something else entirely like dried fruit or something. But I find that this works best for me. I like to keep it pretty simple, and this holds everything together nicely. I'm just going to grab a spoon and stir that together, and then this bowl goes off to the side until we finish the next part of the process, which is over on the stovetop. This is the process that takes a little bit more effort, but I find that it's worth it for the product you get at the end. I'm going to combine some salt, some honey, and some brown sugar on the stove. I'm going to bring these to a boil and let them boil for anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds and no more. This is cooking it to like a candy stage, and so anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds, when it cools, it gets slightly hard. If you cook it longer than 60 seconds, you could have granola bars that break your teeth. And I am confident you don't want to waste all of your ingredients on those kind of granola bars. So you have to keep an eye on this, you have to stir it regularly, but it does make a nice product. So I'm going to show you some footage of what it looks like in different stages as it starts to get warmer, as it starts to melt more, becomes more liquidy, and eventually when it starts to boil. Usually we look for a hard boil or a rolling boil, and that is a boil that you can't stir down. So no matter how much you're whisking it or stirring it around, there are still bubbles popping up to the surface. That is a full boil, and that is what we are looking for. Right now, I'm setting the timer. I always set my timer for 30 seconds just to give me a little bit of wiggle room so I can take it off the heat and I don't overdo it. It also gives me a little buffer time in case there's a kid interruption or I need to do something like move a camera. Once it's done boiling, take it off the heat and put in your peanut butter. I recommend having this pre-measured before your mix comes to a rolling boil, otherwise you'll be scrambling and it's not as easy to stir in when it's a little bit cooler. Unfortunately, I was at the bottom of my peanut butter container, and so I have this very large hunk of semi-solid peanut butter that I'm gonna mix in here. It's not pretty, but it does eventually come together. I'm going to add a splash of vanilla extract and then do my final mixing to make sure it is all one nice smooth sauce. The original recipe says to pour the sauce onto the dry ingredients, but I prefer to put the dry ingredients in the saucepan. I have found that if I put the sauce on top of the dry ingredients, it cools too quickly and hardens before I can actually get everything mixed together. So I like to use the residual heat of that pan to keep my sauce nice and pliable so I can spread it around onto all the pieces of Rice Krispies, oats, and whatever else you add. It takes a decent amount of stirring, but just keep going and eventually that peanut butter mixture will coat all of the pieces of cereal. This is what my mixture looks like whenever I am done stirring. I prepared a 9x13 by lining it with parchment paper to make my life a little easier. If I press them into parchment paper, you can just lift them out when you're ready and cut them, but you can also grease the 9x13 if you don't have parchment paper on hand. This is what they look like in the 9x13, and this is what my pear cobbler looks like when it comes out of the oven. It smelled really good, it looked really good, and I couldn't wait to eat it. This is footage from the next day, so you could see what the inside of the cake looks like. Like I said, it was a little moist, it was a little dense, but it tasted really good. As soon as we finished breakfast, I got started on dinner. I just quickly cleaned out my cast iron skillet here. Actually, I still see a couple pieces of egg on there, but I got it back on the stove, heating up with some oil. I probably used lard here, and I got my roast searing. I don't always include this step when I make a roast because sometimes I just don't want to fuss with the mess of it, but the pan was already out. I already had everything ready, and so I thought I probably should do all of the steps correctly. So I just let this sit on my super hot cast iron skillet until I get a nice dark crust on that side, and then I flip it over to do the same on the other. I'm using the instructions and recipe from Jill Winger's cookbook, The Prairie Homestead. If you don't have this cookbook yet, you are missing out. I use this cookbook regularly, like weekly, because it is chock full of so many great recipes. It's time to very carefully move my roast into the crock pot and deglaze my pan. I think the recipe calls for beef broth here, but I wasn't going to open a can of beef broth for just this amount. So I grabbed some water. It's bubbling in the pan to get all of the juices and flavor off of the bottom of the pan that were put on there from the roast. So again, very carefully, I'm going to stir this around, get everything off the bottom of my pan, and then add it to my slow cooker because we don't want to sacrifice any flavor. To my roast, I'm adding lots of Redmond real salt, freshly cracked black pepper, garlic powder because I don't have any fresh garlic on hand, onion powder because I didn't feel like cutting an onion at that moment. I'll also be adding some Worcestershire sauce and soy sauce alternative. I have coconut aminos. Pop the lid on your crock pot, set your timer for 8 hours, and dinner is basically done. In a perfect world, I would serve my pot roast with mashed potatoes, but my kids don't love mashed potatoes and I don't want to waste them. So I decided to do cubed potatoes instead. They really like them because they're bite-sized and they get crispy, and I like them for that reason too. Another thing I like about this is that I can prepare them ahead of time. So my kids are currently occupied. I have time, so I'm going to maximize it in the kitchen. I'm going to cube all these potatoes and put them into the cold water that you see on the countertop. Keeping the potatoes in cool or cold water will prevent them from getting brown and remove some of the starch, so you get a nicer end product. This is slightly unrelated, but I find a lot of people afraid of using big knives or knife skills or whatever the case is. I really enjoyed watching YouTube videos on professional knife cutting skills, and it has helped me gain a lot of confidence as I work in my kitchen. So if that's something that intimidates you, use YouTube. YouTube is like my favorite resource, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to create videos. I'm a visual learner, and having YouTube at my fingertips has been a great resource to me. So, if you haven't ever considered that, check it out. My bowl is full of potatoes. Those are going to sit until dinner time. And as I'm here at this counter, I notice that my granola bars are ready to be cut. So I pulled the parchment paper out of my 9x13 and sat it right on top of the cutting board I was using, and I'm going to slice these into bars for my family. Again, because you made them, you can make them whatever size you want. This is what they look like up close. They're nice and compact. They stay together. They're not sticky. And check it out. They are absolutely delicious. This whole 9x13 was gone in about 24 hours at my house. I would imagine they would last for a week or so if your family didn't eat them that quickly. And I just keep them on the countertop. You could probably put them in like a plastic bag or something sealed, and you could probably put them in the fridge to make them last longer. But I have zero experience with any of that because I just put them in my 9x13, pop a lid on top, and they disappear in hours. I make the most basic version of these granola bars, but you can definitely add mix-ins if your family would like that. My kids really like when I put mini chocolate chips on top. I think they're plenty sweet as they are, so I try not to add more sweetness on top, but every once in a while they twist my arm enough and they're cute enough that they get chocolate chips on top of their granola bars. I think the blog post with the original recipe has lots of suggestions too, so check that out in the description. It's time to get dinner started. Every time I watch one of these videos and I see myself wearing shorts, I have to laugh to myself because I start the day in pants and then I am just busy chasing after three boys, getting stuff done that I get way too warm for pants, even in the middle of winter. So, yes, I know I'm wearing shorts, but that's just how I roll. I have my large sheet pan here. I put some bacon grease on it, popped it in the oven so that would melt, and then put my potatoes on top. I'm going to add some seasonings on top. My favorite are salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika. But like always, add whatever you like on top of your potatoes and whatever your family will enjoy. I'm going to gently toss the potatoes to distribute the bacon grease and all of the seasonings as evenly as I can. Sometimes I will add a couple extra dollops of bacon grease or lard or tallow on top, but I didn't today and they always turn out fine. So don't fuss too much. And just like that, the potatoes are ready to go in the oven. This pan of potatoes will go on one oven rack, and the cast iron skillet with bacon will go on another rack. I'm cooking that bacon to one, have the bacon grease in the pan, and then crumble bacon on top of some green beans. This is what my roast looks like when I take the lid off. It doesn't look pretty, but I assure you it tastes really good. It is so fall apart tender, I hardly have to shred it. I'm just like poking it with some forks, and it is falling apart. For the longest time, I tried to use the slow cooker function on my Instant Pot, and that stainless steel liner just does not function the same as this heavy duty crock. So, thanks, Mom, for the new crock pot for Christmas. I'm getting lots of good use out of it. The bacon is done cooking in the oven, so I'm going to remove the pieces of bacon and put them on that plate and keep the grease in the skillet. If you've been around, you know that canned green beans are a little rough at our house. We've had them for a long time and we don't really like how they taste. So lots of people suggested bacon, and I've definitely used bacon before. Bacon makes everything better, right? So we are going the bacon route. I'm going to dump some of these green beans in the pan. It's very difficult to get green beans out of a regular mouth mason jar. But anyway, get some green beans in the pan, add some seasonings, and pop those in the oven to warm up. I will get the bacon on later before I serve them. I wish I had exact times and temperatures to offer you, but I've just done this so many times that I know generally how long it takes the potatoes to cook and generally when I need to put the green beans in the oven to complement that. It used to bother me so much when I would hear people say, I just cook it until it's done. Like, what do you mean? How do you know to check? How do you know when it's done? And once you've done this enough times, you really do just know how to cook it till it's done. So I will tell you, generally speaking, I have potatoes in the oven at about 400 degrees for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to get them nice and crispy. The green beans were already cooked, they just needed warmed up, so I'm just topping these green beans with bacon and hoping my family will eat them. This is what the meal looks like when it's plated. It was really, really good, and I will be making this again. It is January 29th, and I am making bacon cheeseburger soup from this cookbook, Carnivore in the Kitchen. A couple months ago, I did spend one whole month as a strict carnivore, and that's when I was introduced to Courtney Luna and her cookbook. And I just generally enjoy cookbooks, and so I got this one for Christmas and have enjoyed looking through it and making some of the recipes. This soup tasted really good and it was also extremely filling. I'm doubling the recipe that is in the cookbook because we had company for dinner, but I started with 2 pounds of ground beef in my Dutch oven and now I'm getting this bacon ready. It was partially frozen, so I just cut it up best I could and I will cook it like this. The bacon is just for on top of the soup. My ground beef is cooked the whole way through, and now I'm adding a block of cream cheese and some beef broth. I did not soften my cream cheese ahead of time, so it's still pretty solid. So I'm going to stick it in here. I put some beef on top of it to help warm it up, and that's going to sit on low until everything warms up together. Of course, you need plenty of cheese for cheeseburger soup, so I am shredding some blocks of sharp cheddar that I keep in my basement freezer. I like to buy the blocks and shred them myself. While I know bread is not carnivore, I'm not currently carnivore, and this bread really is the best. This is my freshly milled sourdough loaf, and especially with kids, soup always goes better with bread on the side. While my bread is in the toaster, I came back over to my soup and found that the block of cream cheese was ready to be mixed in with the other ingredients, and I added a little bit of milk like the recipe says. Do you remember that I mentioned that this soup is very rich and very filling? Now you see why. I have quite the assembly line of food here that I'm preparing, and I remember as a new homemaker, a new wife, this would have been extremely overwhelming. But I have done this almost every night since getting married, and you do get better at it with time. So if this is new to you, stick with it, keep practicing, and you will get more confident as you go. And another tip, always have plenty of butter on hand. Butter and bread solve a lot of problems. I turned the temperature way down on my Dutch oven and now it's time to add the cheese. I generally measure cheese with my heart, so I just dump in approximately what the recipe says, give it a stir, give it a taste, make sure it's the way I like it, and the soup is finished. I got everyone a bowl and we just worked our way down the line, getting a little soup, bacon on top, some more cheese on top if anyone wants, and a nice slice of sourdough bread with butter. Everyone was very content with this dinner, and I will probably make it again. It is Thursday, January 30th, and I'm starting to work on dinner. I had a completely different plan for what I was going to make, but when I looked in the fridge, I saw a lot of this, a lot of that, a lot of leftovers, and I realized I could combine them all into one meal to use them up. The more you cook from scratch, the longer you're a homemaker or the longer you make dinners, the easier this will get. So I'm going to combine a bunch of leftovers into fried rice. I had a container of rice in the fridge, and so I cooked a little bit more rice that I'll mix together. I had some leftover meat, I had some leftover veggies, and so I'm just gonna combine all of those in a pot, add some soy sauce, and call it a night. I like to cook my rice in broth, so I cooked this in beef broth to give it a little more nutrition and flavor, and here's the leftover white rice from the fridge. These are the ingredients that I'm working with to make my fried rice. I had some peas and carrots in the freezer, half a jar of green beans left over from a previous meal, some scrambled eggs left over from breakfast, some leftover pot roast in that container in the bottom, some corn, and the coconut aminos that I will be using as soy sauce. My first step is to get the meat in my Dutch oven. It's cold and chunky from being in the fridge, so I'm going to break up the larger chunks of meat a little bit as I warm it up and prepare for the next ingredients. There was a lot more liquid in that container of meat than I anticipated, so I'm adding some of my rice in the bottom here to help soak that up as I get ready to scramble my eggs in the middle. Ideally, I would not have this much liquid, but once I dumped it in the pot, it was in the pot, so oh well. I have plenty of eggs on hand and I like to add as much protein to this meal as I can since a lot of it is rice. So I'm going to add some eggs in the middle and then scramble those. Some people like to cook their eggs separately so they're firmer like the leftover eggs you saw on my countertop, but I'm just going to scramble them in the pot with the beef and the rice. There are two reasons that I like to do this. First of all, I don't have to dirty another pot or pan. And second of all, as this all cooks together, it acts as like a binder and creates nice sticky rice that holds together, so it's a lot easier for my toddlers to eat. I'll show you what it looks like as I cook it. Here are my eggs after a couple of minutes of cooking. I'm just constantly moving them around to make sure all of the eggs get cooked and nothing gets stuck to the bottom of my Dutch oven. It's time to add the rest of the ingredients that will just need warmed up in the fried rice. So you saw corn, leftover scrambled eggs, green beans. And is this the most authentic fried rice you've ever seen? No, it's not. But it will feed my family tonight and get rid of a lot of those leftovers that we were having trouble eating from the fridge. I added some of those frozen peas and carrots in here too, so we have carbs, we have veggies, we have protein, we have all the things we need for a dinner. I only had to dirty one pot, and my family will be fed. I generally prefer to avoid soy if possible, so we usually use coconut aminos as our soy sauce alternative. I'm going to mix this really well, and that's dinner. Fun fact, my husband's family lived in Cambodia for a couple years when he was a kid, and so my mother-in-law can make really good, actually authentic fried rice. And so I need to hang out with her when she makes hers and figure out what else she adds to hers to make it taste so good. Whoops, I forgot I needed to add more rice. So I was debating whether or not to put the freshly cooked rice in the Dutch oven or put the mix-ins into the Instant Pot. I decided this was the easier method for mixing everything together, and so that's what I did, because otherwise the ratio of rice to mix-ins would have been quite high. So this is actually what it looks like when we're ready to eat. You can see how the rice is sticking together on the spoon. That's because I scrambled the eggs the way that I did, so it's nice and sticky and ready to be eaten. It may not look beautiful, but it tasted really good. Good morning. It's Friday, January 31st, and I am in major kitchen mode. So my husband is home from work today because it's his birthday weekend. We have his birthday party tomorrow, and so I'm using this time while he has some of the kids to get a lot of things done in the kitchen. Some of the things are for the party, and some of the things are just to restock our house, and while the kitchen's a mess, I'm just going for it. So I'm not going to show you like the whole process of everything I make because most of the things I'm making you've seen on here before, but I will give you the overview of how I'm juggling everything and what my kitchen looks like when it's an absolute wreck, because the internet's misleading. We all think our kitchens are nice and clean all the time, and I assure you when you cook from scratch, your kitchen is not clean, almost ever. So let me show you what I'm working on, and hopefully you can be encouraged to try some new things or just know that you're not alone. All of our kitchens look like this. Starting off strong with some half-eaten apples from my kids this morning. We have leftover breakfast dishes and a leftover dinner dish on the stove. Here's my coffee that hopefully won't get cold before I get to drink it. This is some yogurt. So I did go to the store yesterday to get a couple things for my husband's party. And so I got a gallon of store-bought milk because we're out of our raw milk. And in the spirit of the challenge, I wanted to make my own yogurt instead of buying yogurt. So that was my compromise. So here we have some yogurt cooling off. I have a video of that on YouTube if you want to see it. Here's my Instant Pot, which my yogurt will go back into whenever it's done cooling and doing all the things. Over here we have my mixer that I use to make some bread. So this is my freshly milled yeast bread. Again, there's a video of that on YouTube, but I'm going to need to wash this because I'm also going to make potato rolls, which you've seen in these videos before, because tomorrow my husband wants burgers for dinner. So I'm going to do the homemade potato rolls, and then at some point today I'm going to make homemade burgers as well, like press the patties. Then moving over here, here is some wheat that I milled for a friend, so that needs to get put in a jar to take to her. And then here we have lots of dirty dishes hanging out, and yeah, lots more dishes to put away. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, and I will keep you updated as I keep going, but this is real life. Welcome. The day kind of got away from me, but this is what I have to show you. The yogurt is back in the Instant Pot, and I have 2.5 loaves of bread since we already ate half a loaf. This is a double batch of freshly milled potato rolls for the party because I will be feeding 17 people tonight. We had a great time celebrating my husband turning 30. It was so wonderful to have family with us. Here are a couple of snapshots from the evening. Here is our burger bar with my homemade rolls and charcuterie style toppings, styled by my mother-in-law, on a cutting board actually made by my father-in-law. Out of the 20 hamburger patties I made, we had one left. I made 4 pounds of frozen French fries, which used to be on those 2 baking sheets, and they got destroyed. And last but not least, my sister works as a professional baker. I told her I just wanted a yellow cake with white icing, and she shows up with this. It was beautiful and delicious. Everyone was very impressed, and I was super grateful that she would bring something like that. Plus, she made these super cute cupcakes to commemorate his 30th birthday, too. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in the next one.